And we're live. Samuel, we're ready to go.
Great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Samuel Vilchez-Santiago, and I am the chair of the Orange County Democratic Executive Committee here in Orlando, Florida. I am joined by our friends Laura Kelley, chair of the Miami-Dade Democratic Executive Committee and also an immigration attorney. Also, City of Miami Commissioner Damian Pardo and Representative Johanna Lopez, who represents House District 43 in the Florida House of Representatives. Mi nombre es Samuel Vilchez-Santiago, soy presidente del Partido Demócrata en el Condado Orange y estoy junto a Laura Kelley, que es la presidenta del Partido Demócrata en el Condado de Miami-Dade, el comisionado de la ciudad de Miami, Damian Pardo, y la representante estatal por el Distrito 43, Johanna Lopez. Tonight, we join here to discuss how we're going to respond as a community to the attacks we're seeing coming from both Washington, D.C. and Tallahassee. The state of Florida is made up by many different people from many different communities, and that includes our immigrants. We are a community of immigrants from all over the world, but primarily immigrants from the Latin American and Caribbean region. We've seen over the last few days a clear attack against Venezuelan migrants who had temporary protected status, and that was revoked by the Department of Homeland Security. And that now more recently, we're seeing it also with our Haitian brothers and sisters whose TPS is also at risk. We've seen attacks coming from Tallahassee in the form of new legislation criminalizing our communities for just being. And so we're gathered here today to take a clear stance in favor of our immigrant communities. Immigrants belong here in the state of Florida. Immigrants are the backbone of Florida's economy and the backbone of our communities. And so we're clearly saying here that we will stand with the immigrant communities that are being attacked. And we are here to do everything we can in our power to make sure that these communities have the resources they need in order to fight back against the hatred we're seeing coming from some of our elected politicians. El día de hoy estamos aquí juntos diciendo claramente de que nosotros estamos con los inmigrantes. Hemos visto en estas últimas semanas ataques por parte de nuestros políticos en Tallahassee y en Washington. En Washington hemos visto particularmente un ataque en contra de la comunidad venezolana. Se ha revocado el TPS para más de 600,000 venezolanos y también ahora para la comunidad haitiana. Se está hablando de este tema también. En Tallahassee hemos visto cómo se han pasado leyes nuevas para criminalizar a nuestras comunidades inmigrantes, incluso quitándole el acceso al in-state tuition para las personas que son dreamers, que tienen TPS y también las personas que están buscando por asilo político. Pensamos que es un momento para decir claramente que los inmigrantes merecen estar aquí, que los inmigrantes son el centro primordial de la economía del estado de la Florida y que los inmigrantes son parte crítica de nuestras comunidades. Así que, thank you so much. If you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A. Si tiene alguna pregunta, la puede hacer en la parte de Q&A y nosotros estaremos respondiendo tanto en inglés como español. This is a bilingual forum, so we'll be answering in both English and Spanish. We'll also recording the conversation so you can have it after this and you can actually share it with people. Vamos a estar también grabando esta conversación para que la puedan compartir con sus familias y con sus seres allegados. With that, I'd like to welcome our first panelist, City of Miami Commissioner, Damian Pardo. Por favor, démosle la bienvenida al comisionado Damian Pardo.
Muchísimas gracias. Muchísimas gracias. Voy a hablar un poquitico de los aspectos económicos y después de la realidad política. I'll do English. So, economically, I think this is the first time we have seen an attack on immigrant communities in Miami-Dade County ever since I can remember. If there's one thing that has helped Miami-Dade County be resilient economically every time there has been a recession, it has been our immigrant communities and the monies that come from Latin America, especially people buying real estate when the dollar values come down and things like that. So our immigrant communities have been a great way to have Miami-Dade not feel the stress that the rest of the country has felt. And right now, there's a chilling effect happening throughout all of Latin America and the Caribbean, and even I would say Europe and the rest of the world. Miami's a place where everybody comes here, German, it doesn't matter where you're from, but people like to come here and buy real estate. That has helped our tax base, it's helped our economy, it's helped our resiliency from an economic perspective. That is changing. People are starting to have that kind of chilled impact. They're thinking twice about buying property here or about investing in properties in Miami-Dade County. This is the first time in my lifetime that I have seen that happen. Politically, it's also a very unusual situation because we're probably a third independent, more Republican, and then Democrat. But when you look at that breakdown, the Republicans are almost a little bit silenced on this issue, which they firmly believe in. The Republican Party has always been in favor of the extension of TPS, along with the Democrats. That's one of the few areas that we've had bipartisan collaborations throughout all these years. So the fact that Republicans are a little bit more quiet because they don't want to be retaliated against within their party, or they may be seeking an appointment, I think is a good opportunity for us to focus on unity across whatever party you are. I don't think this is a time for Democrats to be shaming people for not voting or for voting the wrong way. Or I think we should stay away from those types of conversations. If what we really care about is immigrants and the protection of immigrants and their status, then we need to focus on that and not on all the other things. I think if we do that and we ask the public, we ask our residents to bring their electeds along, to tell their electeds to show up, to do more rallies, to be more visible. I think at this point, anything that involves numbers of people and rallies and messages is very, very powerful, because Republicans who want to be a little bit more silent because they don't know what it means for them are going to naturally want to start speaking up because they have to. So I think a part of the reality for us is to bring that unification, whether you're an independent or a Republican or a Democrat, doesn't matter. As people who live in Miami-Dade County, who understand immigration, who understand legal immigration, who understand that immigrants are not criminals. I mean, these basic things, we do have to take a leadership role and try to bring out the numbers and the leaders and unify us to make those kind of statements, which really could resonate nationally, with us as a launching pad for that kind of work. Anyhow, that's kind of what I wanted to touch upon just briefly. I introduced an ordinance in the city of Miami that would basically urging the federal government to support all of the TPS programs for all of the existing nationalities. That passed in the commission unanimously. Interesting, as you could predict, the Republicans on the commission and in the city of Miami were very grateful that I was taking the lead, but they were also way more silent than I would have expected. So I think that's what we need to kind of take the lead on, and I believe they will join us when we do that.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Pardo. El comisionado Pardo explicaba que este es un momento para todos los demócratas de demostrar empatía con todas las comunidades que están siendo impactadas, sin importar por quién estas comunidades terminaron votando en la elección pasada. Es sumamente importante entender las necesidades de nuestras comunidades inmigrantes e enfocarnos en eso y no necesariamente en el tema político por estos momentos. Él presentó un proyecto en la comisión de la ciudad de Miami a favor del TPS, llamando al gobierno federal a respetar el estatus temporal de todas las personas que tienen este estatus en Miami y obtuvo el apoyo de todos los comisionados, pasó de forma unánime e incluso los republicanos de esta comisión votaron a favor. Con esto quiero darle la bienvenida a la representante Johanna Lopez. Representative Johanna Lopez.
Gracias, Samuel. Gracias a todos los que están aquí presentes. Es un honor para mí saber que no estamos solos, que estamos unidos en la lucha. Mi primera experiencia con la comunidad inmigrante fue en el aeropuerto en el 1998, cuando llegué aquí a Estados Unidos. Y me di cuenta que yo realmente, aunque nací ciudadana americana, soy también una inmigrante, porque esta es una nación realmente de inmigrantes. Si pensamos realmente, todos los que nos hemos mudado aquí, ¿verdad? Con un sueño para lograr nuestras metas, nos une. Lo que he visto realmente en esta ola de persecuciones y de desinformación con relación a lo que realmente es la comunidad inmigrante, es una forma de justificar ciertas acciones porque ven el poder que tiene la comunidad inmigrante latina. Y me quiero enfocar en este caso en la comunidad inmigrante latina porque es lo que más veo a mi alrededor en mi distrito. Aunque como oficial electa he hecho traducciones y resúmenes de los proyectos de ley que hemos visto en Tallahassee, de los cuales estoy totalmente en contra, en inglés, en español, en creol y en mandarín, porque son también los idiomas que más se hablan dentro de mi distrito, además del inglés. Así que lo hice en estos idiomas porque entendía que era importante educar a la comunidad con relación a los proyectos a los proyectos que estaban a las propuestas de ley que ya son leyes, ¿no? Prácticamente ya los firmó el gobernador en Tallahassee. Realmente estoy al lado de la comunidad inmigrante. Yo no estaría donde estoy hoy si no fuera por la comunidad inmigrante. Yo llegué aquí en el 98 y mis estudiantes indocumentados fueron los que corrieron mi campaña junto a estudiantes que también tenían asilos políticos, como era Samuel Vilche, que estaba en ese momento, acababa de graduarse de high school. Fue el que me dio la idea que corriera para School Board y cuando yo no creía en mí, mis estudiantes inmigrantes me dijeron, tú sí puedes, tú puedes hacerlo. Yo tenía mucho miedo por el acento que tenía y como ya yo había trabajado en el aeropuerto con los inmigrantes lavando carros, aun cuando tenía una preparación académica, vi que además como inmigrante muchas veces pues nos unimos a hacer tareas y labores que otras personas no realizan en el estado de la Florida. Y eso ayuda a la economía de la Florida, porque nosotros, ¿verdad? Aunque tenemos ciertas preparaciones profesionales, a veces el estatus migratorio no permite que ejecutemos la profesión que realmente estudiamos en nuestros países. Ahí conocí abogados, ahí conocí maestros, ingenieros, venezolanos, brasileros, dominicanos. Y me di cuenta que hay una fuerza bien grande en la comunidad latina. Con mis estudiantes los vi a muchos de ellos sufrir, trabajar para ayudar a sus padres para poder sobrevivir. Eran bien trabajadores, bien académicos. Realmente ellos fueron los que me inspiraron, si no, no estaría aquí ni como miembro de la Junta Escolar, ni tan siquiera como oficial electo en la Florida, ni como una representante del distrito, siendo la única puertorriqueña en un momento. Ahora tenemos dos puertorriqueños. Pero lo más importante de todo esto es que cuando nos unimos, creamos una fuerza. Y desgraciadamente estoy muy de acuerdo con el comisionado Pardo. No es el momento de perseguir agendas políticas, sino es el momento de unirnos en una sola voz, pero también tenemos que ser cuidadosos en cómo nos unimos en esa sola voz. Muchas veces las personas dicen, que él no está haciendo, que él está haciendo. Hay muchas cosas que se tienen que hacer de ciertas maneras estratégicas. En mi caso, que tengo reuniones en privado con las superintendentes y con los miembros de las juntas escolares, porque como madre, abuela y maestra que fui, entiendo que la escuela es un lugar que se debe respetar, es un santuario al cual también se ha ponido en riesgo y estamos sufriendo un sinnúmero de ausencias y de bajas de los padres. Entonces, ¿cómo desarrollar ciertas conversaciones de una manera disimulada? Porque también tenemos que proteger a nuestras personas que todavía están indocumentadas, que no tienen documentos, e inclusive personas que ahora mismo están a punto de perder su TPS. So, desde ese punto de vista, tengo unas estrategias un poco diferentes del comisionado Pardo, pero quiero identificar esto porque entiendo que hay distintas formas de manejar esta situación que estamos viviendo con relación a conocer tus derechos. Cuando estaba Trump en un momento que sufríamos de la misma situación, me acuerdo en ese momento que tuvimos varias caminatas, varias huelgas, varias reuniones locales donde se podían desarrollar reuniones locales porque no eran órdenes ejecutivas. Ahora tenemos otra situación. Lo que funcionó antes, ahora tal vez no va a funcionar. Entonces en eso tenemos que ser un poco estratégicos y cuidadosos de cómo nosotros, y yo me he dado la tarea de que la comunidad puertorriqueña entienda la importancia que como nacen ciudadanos, tienen que también llevar este mensaje de la protección a nuestros inmigrantes, que los puertorriqueños también estamos con nuestra gente inmigrante y hay que seguir promoviendo que todos los latinos se unan a esta lucha de protección, que lo único que está dirigido en este caso es un fortalecimiento para la economía, para la seguridad social. La desinformación no, es totalmente falsa. Nuestra gente migrante viene aquí a trabajar y viene aquí a triunfar y tener éxito. Es triste, ¿verdad? Mi district aide, mi secretario en el distrito, él tiene TPS. Excelente, un muchacho con 4 puntos, a punto de graduarse de la universidad. Este año se gradúa de la Universidad Central de la Florida. Y el temor que él sufre, el temor que sufre su familia, ¿sabe? Yo nunca voy a entender tal vez ese sufrimiento, me uno al dolor. Lo que sí le quiero terminar diciendo que no están solos, estamos con ustedes, por eso estamos aquí todos. Lo que necesiten de mí, mis oficinas están dispuestas a ayudarlo en lo que usted necesite. Si necesita los resúmenes en cualquiera de estos idiomas, me puede escribir un correo electrónico o puede comunicarse con mis asistentes, Samuel ahí puede poner la información. Cualquier cosa, aquí a la orden, gracias por todo lo que hacen y gracias, por favor, no pierdan la esperanza. Unidos, yo sé que somos más fuertes y vamos a lograr a que hayan cambios. Yo sé que esto pronto se va a sentir el impacto económico en esta situación.
And Johanna, can you please briefly say it in English?
Well, in 2 minutes. Well, when I came from Puerto Rico, my first experience with the immigration, with the immigrants, was at the airport. I was working in a car wash with immigrants. And I realized that I feel extremely related to them, even though I born as a citizen because I'm Puerto Rican. I didn't feel like a citizen. I feel like an immigrant too because I was moving from Puerto Rico to the United States. For me, this is the nation of diversity and needs to be respected because of that. The immigrants, it's the nation of immigrants. So for me, if it's not for my students, I couldn't be where I'm at right now. My student wrote my campaign for school board. I did not believe in myself until the students came to me and said, listen, you are the one that needs to represent us at the school board. So thanks to my students, Samuel Vilchez used to be my campaign manager, by the way. I remember that, I told him I feel very scared. My accent is so strong. I don't think I'm going to make it. And he said, no, you will make it. We did not know anything about politics. Now Samuel is an expert, and thanks to them, mostly they were undocumented. Most of them, they did not even obviously have the right to vote, but they mobilized and organized the community to make them vote for the teacher that have the accent, no? So we created this quote. They created this video of my accent is an asset. And after that, every single time I have interviews or I have debates, I always have to pray because I feel very uncomfortable because of my accent and my language. But thanks to them, I won. I own my seat to my immigrants, and I keep owning this seat because of my immigrants. Sometimes they think because they couldn't vote, they cannot make a change. Yes, they could do it. They did it, and they will do it. And thanks to them, I'm here today. You're not alone. You have me, you have all of us. Don't discourage yourself. Let's fight together. And thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for maintaining the economy, not only of Florida, but because of the nation. The nation need you, but they will find out. They will find out. They will find out. I know I heard a lot of conversations about almost $300 million. The hospitality and lodging field is gonna miss in revenue. So that's gonna be an impact. So thank you for all you do, and I'm here to serve you.
Thank you, Representative Lopez. And now we'll go to Laura Kelley, who's the chair of the Miami-Dade Democratic Party and also an immigration attorney. She'll be talking a little bit more about the Know Your Right training. And then again, if you have any questions, please put them on the Q&A section and we'll make sure to get to them. Ahora vamos a recibir a Laura Kelley, que es la presidenta del Partido Demócrata en el condado de Miami-Dade y también es una abogada de inmigración. Ella va a estar explicando un poco más el tema de conocer sus derechos. Si tiene alguna pregunta, recuerde ponerla en la parte del Q&A de este Zoom. Laura.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful to be here, grateful for Representative Lopez being here and Commissioner Pardo as well. I also have, I ran for office and was concerned about my accent, but it was my accent in Spanish. So I think that we can all relate to, feeling like we're, perhaps not good enough, but we all are, and we all make this community stronger. As an immigration attorney, I knew what we would be facing with the upcoming Trump administration. I didn't realize it would also be coming from the state quite so much. And that has been shocking and disappointing. As Samuel mentioned earlier, we have not only had TPS revoked for Venezuelans, we just had it revoked now for Haitians. I think we can expect any group of people with TPS to have it revoked eventually by this administration. But also we have people who entered legally to this country with parole under the CNHV parole program, who not only have lost the ability to continue that program, so new people cannot enter with that program, but there's also an executive order that says that the DHS can rescind paroles that have already been granted. And so that means somebody who right now has legal status in this country under this parole program could lose it tomorrow. And that affects Cubans, Nicaraguans, Haitians, and Venezuelans, as well as Ukrainians. So it's really a difficult moment, I think. And we have to demonstrate our support for our immigrant communities, while also staying strong and steadfast that we believe in secure borders, and we believe that criminals people who've actually committed crimes, that should be the priority for this administration when they're executing the immigration laws. And we also have to keep our communities safe. As Representative Lopez mentioned, there has been a tremendous drop in attendance in schools. People are not going to church as frequently. They're houses of worship, and they're some people not going to work. And as Commissioner Pardo said, that harms our economy. And so this has far-reaching effects. And it's also extremely important to understand that these are not individuals who live alone and do their own thing, right? They're part of our community, but they're also part of our families. Many of our immigrants in Florida are in mixed status families. I have many clients who are either TPS recipients or parole recipients or undocumented immigrants who are married to US citizens or have US citizen children, and this affects families, family unity. And I think that these are messages, like Commissioner Pardo said earlier, that we could stand together on a bipartisan level. We support family unity. We support safe communities, because what the state is doing by diverting resources from the investigation and prosecution of actual crimes in our communities, and basically deputizing local law enforcement officers to be immigration agents, our communities become less safe. And there's also been a number of changes in the law that actually affect victims of crime negatively, and that reduces the chance that somebody who may not have legal status in this country reports crimes that occur. And again, that is a public safety concern. That is a public safety issue. Voy a decirlo un poco en español y Samuel seguramente me va a corregir o añadir algo que falta. Pero quiero decir que nuestras comunidades, son una mezcla de inmigrantes, no inmigrantes, y los inmigrantes hacen nuestras comunidades más fuertes. Lo que han hecho no solo en el nivel nacional, pero el nivel estatal es básicamente atacar esas comunidades, hacer la vida más difícil y nos ponen en peligro. Nos ponen en peligro porque si nuestros recursos no están yendo a priorizar ejecutar las leyes de migración con la prioridad a delitos graves o gente que han cometido delitos graves, nosotros todos estamos menos seguros. Y eso es lo que está pasando en el nivel estatal, igual a nivel nacional. Estamos viendo que los venezolanos van a perder su estatus de TPS, los haitianos van a perder su estatus de TPS. También podemos esperar que todas las personas que se benefician de TPS en algún momento va a perderlo bajo esa administración. Y no solo son gente con TPS, pero gente que entraron con parole legalmente, como patrocinados por sus familias. Y tenemos familias aquí en nuestras comunidades que son de estatus mezclados, mixtos, que están, básicamente separando familias. Y nosotros tenemos que demostrar nuestra solidaridad con familias unidas, comunidades seguros. La gente debe sentirse seguro yendo a la escuela, yendo a trabajar y yendo a sus iglesias. Y eso es completamente lo opuesto de lo que están haciendo a nivel nacional y a nivel federal. So I also want to say, sorry, someone.
There's a question here. I don't know if you'd like to go ahead and take it, but it's related to the piece around the humanitarian parole program and how, that's also been impacted and how that's impacting Cubans. Could you talk a little bit more about that? And then there's a question about have Venezuelans and Haitians been deported already?
Yeah. Okay. So for humanitarian parole, and again, humanitarian parole, basically all parole is considered humanitarian parole. It's under statute 212D5. And so we kind of have to distinguish what parole we're talking about, what parole program we're talking about. But if it's, and I say CNHV parole because that was a parole program started by the Biden administration that allowed people to sponsor their family members to come to the United States. It was a family reunification program, and it was also a disincentive program so that people wouldn't come to the border so that they could come legally in the United States with parole. Regarding Cubans, this does not affect Cubans as much. Well, let me say this, it does, because I mean, we didn't know that until like 2 days ago, but essentially when, unlike every other nationality in this country, Cubans have the Cuban Adjustment Act. And if they have a parole or a legal entry into the United States, after 1 year and 1 day, they are eligible to become lawful permanent residents in the United States. They're eligible to apply for lawful permanent resident status. So the parole that was initially granted was for 2 years. And so if somebody was here under that parole and they've reached that 1 year, they would be eligible to adjust status. And there were some provisions in the state law that was just signed by our governor that said that Cubans were specifically exempted from certain portions of that law that made it illegal, I believe, to come into the state of Florida if you were not documented. But what has happened is yesterday we received news that everybody who entered essentially over the last 4 years to the United States with parole, either granted after they entered or entered with this parole, have all of their applications frozen. And so this means that, and they're saying that's because there's the potential for fraud. I want to be really clear that when people were entered the United States with parole, they were fingerprinted, they were vetted. When we talk about this fraud with the parole program, it's really about who the sponsors were, not who the immigrants were. So who were the people with lawful status in the United States who sponsored these people? And that maybe there were people who maybe said they were going to bring somebody over and could be holding that over their head in some way. So the fraud isn't on the part of the immigrants that they have identified or labeled in order to demonize this program. But what that means, if they're freezing these applications, that if somebody entered with what this parole program, and they were Cuban or Nicaraguan or Venezuelan or Haitian, and had a U.S. citizen family member that could petition for them, like a U.S. citizen spouse, those petitions are now frozen. Those applications are now frozen. And we don't know for how long they will be frozen. And so that would prevent Cubans from adjusting status. And I say that because I was on Univision last week, and one of our Miami-Dade Congress people, Maria Elvira Salazar, said that the I-220A form, and this is it's a order of release on your own recognizance that many people who entered the United States over the last 4 years was received, including Cubans, was created by the Biden administration in order to stop Cubans from getting Cuban Adjustment Act. And that is absolutely not the case. I-220A is not a parole. It was found to not be parole, not by the Biden administration, but by the Board of Immigration Appeals. And that form has been used since at least 2007. So it was not a program or a form created by the Biden administration. So like Representative Lopez said, there's a lot of misinformation that is happening in our communities. Let me see if I can say that a little bit like briefly in Spanish. I know it's very verbose, pero lo que quiero decir es que sí, los cubanos pueden ser afectados por lo que está pasando con parole. Normalmente, si alguien que es cubano entra a los Estados Unidos con parole o reciben un parole después de haber entrado, están elegibles para hacer la aplicación de residencia bajo el ajuste cubano después de 1 año y 1 día. Y los paroles del programa de Biden de parole eran para 2 años. Así que si alguien ya ha estado aquí por 1 año y 1 día, estaban elegibles a aplicar por el ajuste cubano. Sin embargo, lo que las noticias hemos recibido ayer era que la administración Trump ha decidido de congelar todas esas aplicaciones de gente que han llegado a los Estados Unidos en los últimos 4 años. Y eso incluye el ajuste cubano, incluye gente que tenían familia, que eran ciudadanos americanos o residentes permanentes que han aplicado para sus familiares que entraron con ese parole. Y eso realmente debemos pensar en lo malo que es esto, realmente, porque ese programa de parole, estamos hablando de unificación o reunificación familiar. Y esas personas que sí tenían miembros de la familia que eran ciudadanos americanos o residentes permanentes, um, podían someter aplicaciones para legalizar el estatus de sus miembros de su familia. Y congelar esas aplicaciones es destacar que no son queridos aquí en este país. Y eso es totalmente, para mí, en mi opinión, inaceptable. Y es súper negativo a nuestras comunidades y lo que nuestros, valores humanos realmente. Porque ¿qué es más sagrada que la familia? Y ahora hay, es una situación bastante difícil, pero, you know, eh, eh, vamos a ver lo que pasa y es por eso que estamos haciendo eso, para apoyar nuestra comunidad inmigrante, nuestra comunidad con familias de estatus mixtos tenemos que hacer todo lo posible para frenar esa situación. También quería decir que como decía la representante López, hay mucho desinformación sobre inmigración en nuestras comunidades, incluso de nuestros representantes, como María Elvira Salazar, diciendo que el programa del I-220A era un programa del presidente Biden para frenar el ajuste cubano. Eso no es correcto. Han utilizado la forma I-220A desde hace por lo menos 2007 y fue utilizado bajo la administración de Trump, la primera administración de Trump, y no tiene nada que ver con el ajuste cubano. El hecho de que el I-220A no está considerado un parole para ajuste de estatus, sea bajo el ajuste cubano o bajo la ley normal, no era una decisión del presidente Biden, era una decisión de la Junta de Apelaciones de Inmigración, basado en su interpretación de la ley. Así que tenemos que hacer todo lo posible para diseminar la información correcta, porque información es poder.
If I can, I'd like to emphasize the point around how inhumane and cruel some of these decisions are. The situation in these countries that have received the CHNMV parole program and also the Youth for You program, which is for Ukraine, it's very dire. There's humanitarian crises going on in all of these places, in all of these countries. And what the Trump administration is doing is pretty much saying it's okay for these people to be sent back to these humanitarian calamities. It's okay for somebody to go back to Venezuela, despite the fact that the likelihood that they'll end up disappear in some jail is really high. It's okay for someone who had to escape the dictatorship in Nicaragua to have to go back to Ortega's regime or to Diaz-Canel's regime. And if you really think about it, for this particular program, it was primarily utilized for people to reunify their own families, right? Like I myself, I'm a sponsor of 4 of my family members who came to the United States after being vetted, heavily vetted. I myself, as a sponsor, was vetted too. Yeah. They came to the United States legally through a program that was created by the federal government and the Biden administration. Over 1 million people here in the state of Florida in the country came through that program. They come here legally. They get to work. They're contributing to our economy. They're contributing to our society. And now the Trump administration, and by the way, they had promised that they were only going to be targeting criminals. Now they come and say, well, it's okay for them to go back, despite the fact that they now have ties to this country, and despite the fact that there's humanitarian calamities happening in their home countries, and which was the main reason why they moved here. We're talking about grandmothers, children, people who go to college here. And so that is part of the conversation we need to have about how cruel and inhumane some of these actions have been. And no, it's not about, deporting criminals, which was the campaign promise. It's been extended to a number of people that do not fall under that category. People who are good, law-abiding people that have been contributing to our economy and our society. So we also have to make sure that we're pushing back on some of the misinformation that's coming from Washington, D.C. and Tallahassee when it comes to who the people that have been targeted, who are those people? And for the most part, for 99% of those people are good people that just want the same thing anyone else in this country, any other American citizen wants.
Absolutely. And the part of the messaging that we've heard is saying that, well, anybody here who doesn't have legal status is a criminal. And I just want to emphasize that that is not the case. Okay. Being here without legal status is not a crime. Okay. Estar aquí en los Estados Unidos sin estatus legal no es un delito. Okay. Y esa retórica que hablan de inmigrantes de esa manera no debe ser aceptado y no debemos reforzarlo y tenemos que luchar en contra de ese tipo de lenguaje porque es totalmente incorrecto. Y la administración Trump debe priorizar, deportar, detener gente que han cometido delitos graves en lugar de buscar cualquier persona que puedan encontrar, porque eso es lo que están haciendo. They're really just trying to find any immigrant that they can to detain and deport as quickly as possible. There is a question here I'd like to answer from Maria. She's asking, I keep hearing mixed information on whether ICE is or not going into schools and churches. So I think the answer is sometimes. Like there have been reports of ICE going into schools in certain communities or attempting to go into schools in certain communities. And this is part of the Know Your Rights aspect of what we're doing here today. ICE or even local police do not have the right to enter a school to conduct a raid. They have to have a warrant signed by a judge. They need to have a judicial warrant signed by a judge to look for a specific person. If they do not have a judicial warrant signed by a judge, they cannot enter that school unless the superintendent or the principal allows them to enter that school. Okay, so I want to say that in Spanish. Que cualquier agente, sea estatal o federal, sea de ICE o de otra entidad, no pueden entrar a una escuela o una iglesia o cualquier lugar de culto sin una orden judicial firmado por un juez. No un orden de ICE o del Departamento de Seguridad Nacional, tiene que ser firmado por un juez. Y la única manera que ICE pueden entrar es si el principal o superintendente dejan entrar a la escuela. Y también igual como una iglesia o cualquier lugar de culto no pueden entrar sin el permiso básicamente del dueño del lugar, ¿okay? Para hacer redadas. Y cualquier persona, incluso a nuestras casas. Así que si ICE quiere entrar a nuestras casas o quieren que nosotros abren la puerta a hablar con ellos, tenemos el derecho de decir no y pedir una orden judicial firmado por un juez. Y muy poco veces ellos tienen ese tipo de orden. porque eso es cuando están buscando realmente a alguien con delitos graves. Y si no tienen eso, no tienen que abrir la puerta o dejar a esos agentes entrar en el lugar, sea iglesia, sea un templo, sea una escuela o sea nuestras casas.
And the other important piece about that issue that it's important to point out, under the Obama administration, there was a executive order signed giving directive to ICE not to enter schools, churches, or religious places in general. And that has been rescinded by a new executive order passed or signed by President Trump. And then there was a new law here in the state of Florida that passed under a special legislative session actually last week that makes it easier for local agents and for ICE agents to be able to enter the schools and the churches. Democrats in Tallahassee presented amendments to basically create carve-outs for schools and churches, and the Republican majority pretty much said no.
Absolutely, and that that shift is just it just shows you the cruelty of what is happening here. So then I have another question from Gina Ruiz. I'm going to kind of just go to the end of it, which is anyone, even a naturalized citizen, at risk and needing to fear ICE? Well, we have heard reports of Spanish-speaking U.S. citizens. You know, people, for example, just many people are U.S. citizens who Spanish is their native language, or, you know, choose to speak Spanish for whatever reason. And we have seen reports of U.S. citizens being detained. Okay. However, if a U.S. citizen is detained by ICE and if they say they're a U.S. citizen and they're not released and quickly, that U.S. citizen can sue the government for their detention. And because it is on the U.S. government to demonstrate somebody's alienage, right? It is not on the immigrant to prove that they are U.S. citizens or not, or a U.S. citizen. I don't have to prove to anyone that I'm a U.S. citizen. But when they do these raids, when they, you know, basically racially profile individuals, then yes, U.S. citizens can be caught up in that. But I think that rather than fear ICE or fear these agents, I think we should, you know, stand in solidarity with our immigrant communities and do exactly what we're saying for them to do, which is refuse to answer any questions whatsoever. And I want to be very clear that, and I want to say undocumented immigrants have the right to not speak to police or ICE agents about their immigration status. Okay? Los inmigrantes sin documentos legales o sin estatus legal en ese país tiene derechos constitucionales igual como los ciudadanos de los Estados Unidos o residentes permanentes y tienen el derecho de permanecer en silencio. Si un agente de ICE o una policía pregunta a ellos sobre su origen nacional o su estatus migratorio y pueden decir, elijo permanecer en silencio. Y no tienen que probar que son ciudadanos americanos, sino es de ICE de probar que alguien no tiene estatus legal en ese país. Hay excepciones y es súper importante destacar, hay excepciones. Por ejemplo, si alguien tiene una visa no inmigrante, sí tienen que preguntar, sí tienen que responder a preguntas sobre su estatus legal en ese país. Pero lo que estoy hablando es a gente que no tienen un estatus legal en este país. Okay. I don't know if I missed anything there.
There was a question related to the point around the schools. Some of the school systems have gotten the directive that if the police or ICE agent believes that the suspects could escape before they get a warrant, that they have the ability to go into the school. Is that true? Is that the case?
There has to be an immediate risk of harm for ICE to enter. They have to have that probable cause to enter, and it's not just that somebody could escape. That's not enough. And that somebody, you remember we're saying that they have to be looking for somebody with a signed judicial warrant, warrant signed by a judge. So if they have a warrant signed by a judge and they think that person's going to escape, then yes, they would be able to go enter that because they have a signed judicial warrant. But without a judicial warrant, they could not enter. Now, if there is, for example, if there is something happening in the school where there's violence or there is some kind of danger, that gives them the reason to enter, police to enter, in order to protect and serve, not to conduct a raid, right? So if there's some kind of violence occurring in a school, that they can enter, obviously, but not to conduct a raid. And I highly recommend that schools and churches seek legal counsel over what they can or can't do. But they could also err on the side of saying no to ICE. That's what I would say. I see this question by James Moyer, and this may be a little bit more like legally, and remember, I'm an immigration lawyer. I am not your immigration lawyer, so I cannot give immigration advice in this forum. But he asked to explain more about Haitian American TPS was changed almost 1 year early. So I would say this: every single one of these executive orders or decisions by the Trump administration are being they're being litigated. So there are lawsuits pending for every single action. There are organizations that are saying that this is not proper. So revoking TPS for Haitians before time, that's not proper. That's going to be challenged in court, just like what they've done for TPS for Venezuelans is going to be challenged in court. So we ultimately do not know what the outcome is going to be. But one of the things, for example, for Secretary Noem to say that conditions have improved in Venezuela is so ridiculously inaccurate that it boggles the mind. It defies logic. It defies common sense. We have a situation in the summer where we've essentially had Nicolas Maduro once again steal an election, persecute people fighting for the right to a free and fair election. And we have political prisoners in Venezuela, in Nicaragua, in Cuba, for merely expressing their opinion. So the idea that there has been some kind of change in circumstance in these countries is absolutely absurd. And especially what's going on in Haiti, while it might not be politically motivated, we have a tremendous humanitarian crisis that is essentially a civil war in Haiti. And so for them to say that the conditions have improved is absurd. It's being challenged in court, and so we will ultimately see what will happen there. So we hope that our judiciary will do the right thing and support the rule of law. But we also have to make sure that when we vote, that we're voting for representatives in Congress. For example, in April, if you live in District 1 or District 6, or in 2026, for all of our congressional representatives, a senator will be able to vote for in 2026, that they're going to stand up for the rule of law. Because they always say we're a country of laws. We are absolutely a country of laws. So why are they not following the legal procedure set forth by the Immigration and Nationality Act? So yo diría eso, que somos una nación de leyes, no están siguiendo las leyes, no están siguiendo la ley de inmigración y nacionalidad, están utilizando procedimientos que no son correctos, y esperamos que nuestros jueces van a proteger nuestros derechos, pero al mismo tiempo nosotros tenemos que votar por representantes que va a frenar esa administración de obstaculizar la ley, básicamente. La ley y orden es lo que están obstaculizando. There was that also had this person also had a question about Vietnamese adjustment. I just want to say that the Indo-Chinese Adjustment Act or Indo-Asian Adjustment Act was for people who entered prior to 1997. It's not particularly relevant right now. There are people who could possibly benefit from that, but it's not relevant to um, uh, our particular discussion, and it's very different than the Cuban Adjustment Act, which has no limitation. Okay, so the Cuban Adjustment Act, someone can benefit from the Cuban Adjustment Act whether they entered, a year and a day ago or 10 years and 10 days ago. Also, I want to say that there was a bipartisan bill introduced today by a number of representatives, including Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Maria Elvira Salazar. She was the only Republican that sponsored that bill, but a number of other Democratic representatives as well in Congress to have the Venezuelan Adjustment Act. And I think that's positive. However, I think that the chance of that passing are low, and I also think the chance of Trump signing that law is also very low. And I would ask our representatives like Maria Elvira Salazar to not pay lip service to doing things now when this is the candidate that she supported, and he said that's exactly what he was going to do. This is none of us should be surprised that this is what Trump has done or is doing. This is exactly what he campaigned on. This is exactly what he said he would do.
The final question, if you have a pending asylum case and you have a valid work permit, does that count as legal status?
No, it does not. And this is a very kind of almost complicated, this is a complicated issue. We like to use the term undocumented immigrant because it's a little bit easier. It's much nicer than saying illegal immigrant, but undocumented, I'm like, well, what does it mean to be undocumented? Because as this person mentioned, if you have a work permit, you have a document, right? It allows you to work legally in the United States. You have an asylum application pending after you get this work permit, but it's not a legal status. And being in application, so even if you're applying for an adjustment of status, you are not in legal status. Now, if you have TPS, you do have legal status. If you have parole, you do have legal status. So they're taking people who have legal status and they're taking away their legal status. So somebody who has an asylum pending and has a work permit, that person can still, and let's say they filed it affirmatively with USCIS, with the Immigration Service, that person can still be detained, can be denied a bond from the immigration judge and have to fight their asylum case while detained, which makes it that much more difficult to prove your case and then ultimately be deported. So no, having a work permit does not mean you have legal status. It means you are authorized to work in the United States. Do you want me to say in Spanish really quickly? Okay, tener un permiso de trabajo no es un estatus legal. Es un documento que te permite trabajar con permiso. Y estar en un procedimiento de aplicación no es suficiente de tener un estatus legal. Al contrario, de tener TPS o parole sí es estatus legal. Y lo que están quitando de personas es estatus legal. Y eso es lo que nunca hemos visto. Es básicamente poniendo personas en la situación que tenía estatus legal y ahora no tienen estatus legal.
Thank you so much, Laura. Any final words?
No, just I appreciate you all being here. I did put these Know Your Rights one-pagers that I helped create with the Florida Democratic Party. They're in the chat. Please be sure to download them and share them. I can also drop some of the social media posts if you wanted to share those as well, or just peruse them, because, again, knowledge is power. I get a lot of pushback. Oh, that's not going to work. Sorry. You can also go to miamidadedems.org. I'm going to put it on the chat. Thank you so much for that. We have a lot of these resources for schools, for students, for individuals. on our website at miamidadedebs.org. You can get that information there as well. Así que cualquier recurso, bueno, hemos puesto recursos en el chat para que puedas descargar, pero también puedes ir a la página web de miamidadedems.org y hay un enlace donde puedes descargar información sobre tus derechos, incluso una tarjeta que puedes imprimir, cortar y dar a agentes de ICE en lugar de decir ni una palabra. ¿Ok? Así que tienen derechos, todos nosotros tenemos derechos constitucionales. Y recuerda que la Constitución es el poder más grande de nuestro país. Y el presidente Trump no está arriba de la Constitución. Nada, no hay ningún político o representante que es más poderoso que nuestra Constitución. Así que recuerda que tenemos derechos. We all have rights, and the Constitution is the law of the land, and President Trump or no other representative is above the Constitution. So maintain our knowledge and power in that.
Muchas gracias a todos por unirse el día de hoy. Creo que un mensaje bien claro que queremos decir juntos es que los demócratas estamos aquí para servir a las comunidades inmigrantes porque entendemos que los inmigrantes son parte fundamental de nuestra comunidad, son parte fundamental de nuestra sociedad aquí en el estado de la Florida y también son una parte crítica de nuestra economía. Entendemos de que esta es una nación de inmigrantes, de que este es un estado diverso donde los inmigrantes jugamos un rol sumamente importante. A clear point that we want to make from both sides, from the Orange County Dems, from the Miami-Dade Dems, from the Florida Dems, is that Democrats understand the value and power of our immigrant communities. Democrats believe and know that this is a state of immigrants, this is a nation of immigrants, and that immigrants come here to work, and that they play a critical piece of our Florida economy, and that immigrants are a critical piece of our society and our community. And so we will stand with our immigrant communities, and we will stand for the rule of law, and we will stand against any one politician who wants to attack our communities, and that includes our immigrants. So again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We will go ahead and send some of the resources we had, the one-pager in both English and Spanish, via email, so that you can pass it down to your friends, your family, and so that we can protect one another in these dark times. Again, thank you, and also thank you to City Commissioner Damian Pardo and to Representative Johanna Lopez for joining this conversation, and thank you to all of you for joining us as well.
Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias.